On the morning of my 65th birthday, I received a gift so shocking, it felt almost surreal. My son, the same boy I had devoted decades to raising and sacrificing for, looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You should move into a retirement home. Leave the house and all the money to me." I didn't argue or shed a single tear. Instead, I simply smiled, walked straight into the city's most upscale senior living community, and signed the papers to move in. That very day, I set up a trust that completely cut him out. No access to my assets and not an ounce of sympathy left for him. Overnight, his world fell apart without me. As for me, my true life began the moment I shut that door behind me. I never expected to spend my 65th birthday like this. All I'd wanted was a quiet, simple dinner. In the kitchen, I prepared my signature chicken and rice casserole, paired with creamy mushroom soup and a crisp Caesar salad. The air was rich with the comforting aroma of home cooking, and the dining table was perfectly set, polished silverware, candles burning gently in their holders, all waiting for my son to walk through that door. But he hadn't stepped foot in this house for an entire year. I remember when he was little. Every birthday I had, he'd hide just around the kitchen door, clutching a bunch of wildflowers in his tiny hands, peeking shyly from the corner. "Happy birthday, Mommy," he'd whisper, his eyes sparkling with pride. But now? I couldn't even remember the last time he called me Mom. I glanced at the clock on the living room wall. 7:30 p.m. He had promised a surprise tonight, but there wasn't so much as a hint of him. I lit the candles, blew them out, and lit them again. Eventually, I gave up. At 8:30, the front door finally creaked open. "Surprise!" Colin stumbled inside, reeking of alcohol. A lazy smirk spread across his face. Before I could say a word, a woman followed him in, clutching his arm. She wore gaudy clothes, her makeup heavy and exaggerated. One hand balanced a huge handbag, the other rested on a noticeably pregnant belly. "Mom, here's the surprise I was telling you about," Colin said, his voice thick with sarcasm. "This is Tessa, my new fiancée. She's 6 months along." I stood frozen. "We figured it's a good time for you to move back in for a bit," he added casually. "Tessa's due soon, and she'll need help during her recovery. You're retired anyway, so you might as well be useful." Tessa tilted her head, sizing me up before wrinkling her nose. "She doesn't exactly look fit enough for baby duty. Are you sure this will work?" I didn't move, but my fingers clenched the hem of my dress tightly. "Of course." Colin shrugged as if we were just talking about the weather. "If you're not up for it, there's always the nursing home. And honestly, those nice places don't come cheap. I hate wasting money." His tone held no warmth or concern. It was a veiled threat, wrapped in cold indifference. I let out a quiet, almost weightless laugh. "So the big surprise was to offer me a babysitting job, and if I refuse, you've already picked out a budget nursing home for me?" He blinked, clearly caught off guard by my bluntness. "Come on, Mom. Don't be like that. Didn't you always say family comes first? Well, now your family needs you." I said nothing. Turning on my heel, I walked upstairs without another word. Everything was crystal clear. He hadn't stayed away for a year because he was busy. He stayed away because I was only valuable when convenient. The meal I'd so carefully prepared sat untouched on the table, cooling just like the last flicker of warmth I'd felt for this house. That night, sitting by the bedroom window, I dialed the number for Skyview Estate, the city's finest senior living residence. "Good evening. Thank you for calling Skyview. How may we assist you?" "I'd like to reserve a premium independent living suite," I said calmly, "for 20 years paid in full." "Ma'am, are you certain? That's quite a significant commitment." "I'm sure," I replied. "And no family members as emergency contacts, please." There was a pause on the other end. "Understood. We'll have your private relocation and wellness team at your residence in 5 days. Thank you." I ended the call and let my gaze drift to the vanity where 2 old photographs sat. One showed Richard and me from our early research days, lab coats on and eyes full of bright hope. The other was of a laughing baby Colin, cradled in my arms. I reached out and turned that second photo face down. A quiet chill settled in my chest. Maybe at 65 I no longer owed anyone my dignity. For the first time in my life, That night, I felt truly relieved. The next morning, as soon as I came downstairs, I heard the clatter of dishes and Tessa's complaining voice echoing through the kitchen. "This kitchen is so outdated," she grumbled, tapping the tiled countertop with a manicured fingernail, like it was some kind of moldy carpet. "No steam oven, no air fryer. How am I supposed to make healthy food for the baby here?" Colin was slouched at the dining table, lazily scrolling through his phone. Without looking up, he said, "Morning, Mom. Mind fixing us some breakfast? Tessa's been really picky lately." I stared at the casserole from the night before, still sitting cold and untouched on the counter, my carefully made birthday dinner, ignored like yesterday's leftovers. "You didn't even touch the food I made," I said flatly. Colin shrugged, showing no remorse. "Tessa said it smelled too strong. Her nose is super sensitive because of the pregnancy." Tessa jumped in right away. "Yeah, the whole house reeks. That greasy smell made me want to throw up. Honestly, ordering in would have been easier." Quietly, I gathered the cold dishes, ready to throw them away. But as I opened the trash bin, something stopped me. There was my mushroom soup, the one I'd spent 2 hours simmering, poured straight into the garbage, a spoon still resting in the bowl. I held the ceramic dish tightly, knuckles whitening with the pressure. "You two staying here is temporary," I finally said, my voice calm but steady, too calm, like the still air before a summer storm. "This house isn't a hotel, and it's definitely not a maternity retreat." Colin frowned. "What's that supposed to mean? Tess is carrying my child. Can't you be a little more supportive? The house will be mine eventually anyway." "That child is yours," I said, locking eyes with him. "Not mine. I'm 65. I'm not your nanny, your maid, or your backup plan." He snapped back, his voice rising in anger. "You used to love me. What happened? How did you get so cold?" I almost laughed. He was right. I had loved him too much, perhaps too much to realize he thought love was something he could take for granted forever. Cold. I turned to face him fully, every word measured and deliberate. "You want to talk about cold? Showing up on your mother's birthday, dragging in a heavily pregnant stranger, treating her like a servant, and then threatening to dump her in a nursing home if she refuses. That's what I call cold." His lips twitched, but no words escaped. It was Tessa who finally broke the silence. "Colin, don't waste your breath arguing with her," she said smoothly, her tone dripping with condescension. "If she's not willing to help, we can easily hire someone else. No need to stay here and be treated like that." She gave him a little push, voice heavy with meaning. "Besides, didn't you say your mom still has some savings? We're short on funds for the investment, remember? If she truly cared about you, wouldn't she want to pitch in?" I locked eyes with Tessa and saw right through that fake smile, pure unfiltered greed shining behind it. It made my stomach churn. "So that's the real reason you're here," I said softly. "It's not about me. It's all about the money." Colin's expression tightened instantly. "Don't speak like that about Tessa. He said it was just a suggestion. And if you do have money, what's wrong with helping your only son?" "Well, I have a suggestion of my own," I replied, voice cold as ice. "You both need to leave. This house doesn't welcome you anymore." The room felt heavier immediately. Colin shot up from his chair. "Are you serious? You're kicking us out?" I calmly met his indignant, entitled gaze. "Do I not have that right?" He shook his head in disbelief. "You're old. I'm your only son. Who will care for you when you're too frail to get around? Do you really think money is going to keep you company?" Emboldened by his words, Tessa spat. "Exactly. If anyone should be leaving, it's you. Colin and I aren't going anywhere, and don't even think about taking any money or assets with you. They belong here." I said nothing, just stared at them with quiet calm and a bitter laugh bubbling beneath the surface. They'd completely forgotten who truly owned this home. In that instant, something inside me snapped. The last flicker of hope I'd held for my son burned out like a dying candle. This time, I was done. I wouldn't live my life for anyone else anymore. 2 days passed, and the house stopped feeling like mine. Tessa claimed the living room as her territory, decking it out with a so-called baby corner full of pink streamers, cartoon cushions, and glittery balloons. She seemed intent on turning the whole house into her own nursery. Not a single quiet spot remained for me to sit and enjoy a cup of coffee in peace. Even the kitchen became her domain. She rearranged the cabinets to her liking, tossing aside my carefully labeled pill boxes, tea tins, and recipe binders, dumping them into the storage closet like trash. Colin spent most of his time holed up in the study, pacing and making one stressful phone call after another. From what I overheard, his so-called new business wasn't going well. More than once, I caught him griping about cash flow to whoever was on the other end. Neither of them mentioned my birthday again, as if that night had never happened. I thought I'd steeled myself enough not to be caught off guard, but some moments still managed to surprise me. That afternoon, after pruning roses in the garden, I came inside to find Tessa stuffing my fine bone china into a cardboard box. "This stuff is ancient," she muttered, wrinkling her nose. "I'm getting something more modern. Colin said you wouldn't mind." "That set belonged to my mother," I said softly, standing in the doorway. She looked back, clearly annoyed. "Well, she's gone now, isn't she? You can't live in the past forever." "This is my home," I said firmly. "Not yours," she scoffed, biting her lip before snapping. "And it's not your decision. You sure act like this place is yours, but honestly, won't it all belong to Colin soon anyway?" I smiled then, steady and unshaken. "You really believe Colin's still getting this house?" That stopped her cold. After a beat, she turned away without a word, leaving the boxes half-packed and the bone china abandoned like garbage. I crouched and carefully returned each dish to its place in the cabinet, one by one. Each piece felt like a quiet act of resistance, a way to hold on just a little longer. But deep down, I knew I couldn't fight this battle alone. That evening, I dialed a number I hadn't called in years. "Hello?" A warm, familiar voice answered. It was Martha, the woman who had run this household for years. Colin had fired her last year without telling me, saying there was no need to pay an old maid for a house with just one occupant. "It's me, Martha," I said quietly. There was a stunned silence, then a flood of relief. "Ma'am? Thank God. I prayed every day that you were okay. I kept wondering if I should just show up at your door." "I'm all right," I said, voice tight, "but I need you to come back." She arrived that very afternoon. Just like old times, she burst through the door, shrugged off her coat, and headed straight for the kitchen. "What in the world? Takeout containers in the fridge? Ma'am, how have you been eating this garbage?" "I can still cook," I said with a weary smile, "but the kitchen doesn't really belong to me anymore." Martha paused, glancing toward the living room. "That girl?" I nodded. "I always said the young master had terrible judgment," Martha muttered. "But this takes the cake. She's just like the rest, only worse. And now even you're being bullied by her." Oh no, that won't stand. At that moment, Tessa came downstairs. She froze when she spotted Martha, her face twisting in displeasure. "Colin, your mom hired help again? I thought we agreed to cut spending." Martha squared her shoulders and stared Tessa down. "I answer to the lady of the house, not you." Tessa scoffed, waddled to the couch, and flopped down silently, but the hostility in her eyes was unmistakable. That evening, Martha cooked my favorite beef stew and vegetable soup. I ate slowly, each bite stitching myself back together after unraveling for so long. When Colin came home, the aroma hit him instantly. He sniffed and smiled. "Smells good tonight." Martha appeared from the kitchen, still holding the pot. "Sir, this was your favorite when you were a boy. Remember?" Colin's grin faltered. His face grew tense. "What are you doing here?" he asked, frowning. "Didn't I tell you you were retired?" "I brought her back," I said evenly. "Mom?" Colin sighed, rubbing his temples. "You're being stubborn again. I know you don't like Tessa, but she's carrying your grandchild. Can't you be a little more understanding?" "Understanding?" I chuckled softly. "You think I brought Martha back because I don't like Tessa?" I gestured to the dining table. "This is a home, not a rental or a crash pad. You don't get to erase everything that made this place mine," I told him. "Mom, are you even listening to yourself? You're destroying any chance we had at being a real family." "If that's what you call family," I said calmly, "then I'd rather be on my own." With a loud clatter, Colin slammed his fork on the table, rattling the dishes. He jumped up, shouting, "Fine, be your lonely little queen then, But don't come crawling back when you're old, helpless, and nobody's left to care for you. I met his glare without flinching. Better to live clear-eyed and alone than to be blindly used. In that moment, I sensed something had shifted between us permanently. Whatever connection we once shared, whatever illusion of mother and son, was now broken beyond repair. I no longer hoped he would understand me, nor did I believe he could ever change. From now on, all I wanted was to spend my remaining years without sacrificing my dignity for anyone. Outside the kitchen window, the sky was still dim as I finished my second cup of coffee at the dining table. Martha moved quietly around the kitchen, preparing breakfast. She asked few questions, never had to. Her eyes caught the thick stack of papers beside me. And finally, in a low voice, she asked, "Ma'am, are you sure about this?" I gave a small nod and gently closed the folder. This wasn't a sudden decision. It had been weighing on me for a long time. For years, Colin's defiance and cruelty had felt like countless tiny cuts. I'd made excuses, telling myself he was just lost, that eventually he'd come around. After all, I had poured so much of my life into raising him. But now I could admit it plainly. The place I once called home was no longer mine. Skyview's transition team arrives at 10 tomorrow morning, I said quietly. I want everything to go smoothly. Martha paused at the stove, her eyes glistening. You've lived in this house most of your life, ma'am. That's exactly why it's time to say goodbye, I replied. She nodded silently and returned to organizing my pill case. At 9, Colin shuffled into the living room looking exhausted, dark shadows under his eyes, carrying Tessa's insulated flask like it weighed a ton. He gave Martha a lazy wave as he entered the kitchen. Can you make an egg sandwich or something? Tessa only wants your cooking now. She wasn't happy with this kitchen a couple of days ago, Martha replied, voice sharp as steel. Colin frowned but said nothing. He sank onto the sofa and turned on the television. I watched the man who once crawled into my lap as a boy, begging me for bedtime stories, now feel like a stranger renting space in my home. Colin, we need to talk, I said softly. Can it wait? He muttered without looking at me. I sat down. Now, I said more firmly. He finally switched off the TV, looking at me with tired eyes. Are you still mad? Mom, I've told you, Tessa means well. She's just blunt. Says things how they are. That's not what this is about. I pulled a single document from the folder and placed it on the table before him. This is my residential plan for Skyview Estate. Tomorrow morning, I'm moving in. At first, Colin didn't react. He flipped casually through a few pages, but when his eyes hit phrases like long-term occupancy, 24-hour concierge, and advanced medical care, something shifted in his expression. You're serious? I am. He was quiet for a moment, then forced a chuckle. Well, maybe a retirement community isn't the worst idea. Go clear your head a bit. If you get bored, I can always find you somewhere else. I held his gaze steadily. I'm not coming back. His smile froze. I'm transferring ownership of this house to Martha and a few close friends who've stood by me over the years. Colin jumped to his feet. What the hell are you talking about? You're giving the house to the help? They've stood beside me for decades. That's more than you ever did. Mom, this is crazy. I'm your son, yet you never treated me like family. The moment you came back here with Tessa, demanding the house and my savings like they were your birthright, that was the moment you stopped being my son. You're just a man who uses blood ties to manipulate affection. His face flushed red, fingers trembling with anger. I knew something was off with you lately. You've been making decisions behind my back. What I should cook, who I should take care of, where I should live. But you never asked what I wanted. He spat a curse under his breath. Fine, keep the house. But don't tell me you're planning to throw your money away too. Without a word, I unfolded a second document and spread it on the coffee table. This is the trust I signed this morning. All my assets will support my care and medical needs at Skyview. The rest will fund a foundation for young artists, supporting their education and exhibitions. His eyes scanned the page, growing wider by the second. You're giving your money to some stupid art fund? That stupid fund reflects what matters to me now, I said evenly. Better the money goes to someone chasing a dream than be wasted by someone who only knows how to take. He let out a bitter laugh. You've lost your mind. Who sets up a charity fund at your age? I do. I met his gaze without flinching. It's my money, and I'm the only one who decides how it's used. The silence between us thickened, heavy and tense. Just then, the doorbell rang. Martha opened it to reveal Skyview's transition team. 3 professionals in tailored suits, calm and polite, carrying clipboards, moving checklists, and medical intake forms. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitmore," one greeted with a courteous smile. "We're here to guide you through your final onboarding before your move tomorrow." Colin paled. The color drained from his face as reality settled in. This wasn't a threat or temporary. It was real. I was leaving. "Mom, you're really doing this?" His voice cracked. "You're handing this house over to strangers and just walking away from me." I calmly gathered the paperwork, closed the folder, and stood. "I'm not the one walking away, Colin," I said softly. "You shut the door on me long ago. From now on, my life is my own. You will never again decide what I do with it." Morning at Skyview was quiet and filled with light. I sat in a wicker chair on the balcony, a warm cup of rose tea beside me, watching the lake shimmer in the morning sun. The air smelled like something I hadn't breathed in years: freedom. There were no raised voices, no urgent demands, no one asking anything of me. The Skyview team had managed everything with seamless grace. The dietitian planned my meals, and nurses logged my health data daily. My schedule quickly filled with gardening courses, flower arranging workshops, and art gatherings. It felt as though long dormant parts of my soul were stirring back to life. For the first time in decades, I didn't have to tread lightly around anyone's feelings or demands. My time belonged entirely to me. During a video call, Martha updated me that everything at the old house was running smoothly. Ownership had officially transferred to her and a handful of trusted friends who had loyally supported me over the years. As for me, returning was not in my plans. That afternoon, I began unpacking a few cherished belongings. Upon moving to Skyview, I'd requested the concierge deliver a private trunk I hadn't opened in ages. Beneath layers of soft velvet inside, I uncovered a heavy wooden frame I'd nearly forgotten. Peeling back the cloth, there it was. Emily Harrington's signature, crisp and clear in the lower right corner. Emily had been my closest friend back in college. This was the last painting she'd ever gifted me. After graduation, she embarked on a traveling fellowship, brushes in hand, dreams in her heart. I stayed behind, diving into my career and a marriage that would ultimately redefine my life. Over time, our worlds quietly diverged. She had titled the work Orchids at Dusk and sent it with a handwritten note. "I know how much you cherish orchids in the evening light. May you always remember the dreams we shared." For years, I'd kept it locked away in my study, not for its market value, but because it meant far too much. Now, bathed in the sunlit living room at Skyview, the painting seemed to take on fresh significance. I was no longer the woman who managed a household and lived in service to others. I was finally someone who had the space and the right to reclaim her inner world. As I gazed at the painting, a gentle thought took hold. Maybe it was time to share these hidden treasures. Perhaps I could make a real difference for young artists like Emily once was. Until this morning, when the front desk handed me an envelope, an invitation from the city's Museum of Art to an exhibition of Emily's final works, themed Women in Nature. 3 months earlier, I had donated several of Emily's late pieces to the museum, Orchids at Dusk among them. An Arts Quarterly described it as a rare and radiant allegory to life. Those canvases had rested in my study for decades, too personal to exhibit, too precious to share. But now I was ready. The exhibition captured widespread attention. New York Arts Weekly ran a full-page feature. Eleanor Whitmore donates Emily Harrington's final works, a monumental gift to American women's art. As I organized the exhibition documents, Skyview's media coordinator appeared with a video call request from Martha. I accepted. She stood outside the old house's gate, expression unreadable. "Ma'am," she began, "your donation made the headlines. Colin saw it and nearly flipped the coffee table." I chuckled. "Isn't he still busy trying to replace the couch with some outrageously priced Italian sofa?" Martha sighed. "It's not the art that unsettles him. It's that he missed the chance. Today, he told me those paintings should have been family heirlooms. Then he asked if you had other valuables hidden. I nodded slowly. So he's finally scared, she said with a knowing smile. Even more intriguing, someone from the bank stopped by. He applied for a personal loan. It was denied. His accounts are frozen. The banker asked if you were involved. I didn't touch his money, I said evenly. I simply revoked his access to my sub-accounts and canceled all automatic transfers. The rest was always his responsibility. Of course, Martha said sharply. He even tried to put the house up as collateral. That's when he realized the titles were already in our names. I smiled faintly. The last piece is now in place. She hesitated. Ma'am, you're really leaving him nothing. I paused, then spoke softly. Just one thing, a letter. When the time comes, he'll receive the safe's key. Martha nodded quietly. Ending the call, I turned to the window. Outside, the gardener pruned roses. Residents gathered near the gazebo, swapping flower arranging tips. Two young women practiced violin beside the fountain, their melodies drifting like something sacred. Beyond this peaceful world, my son, the boy who had once been my center, was only now learning the true meaning of loss. Only now did he realize he no longer held sway over me. But this was just the beginning. Night cloaked the city in shadows and neon. Rain slicked the streets, reflecting the blur of headlights and storefront signs. Colin stood beneath a buzzing bar sign, slumped against the doorway as if drained of strength. The cigarette between his fingers had burned down long ago, but he neither flicked ash nor seemed aware of it. His face was hollowed by exhaustion, dark circles framing his eyes, and the faint scent of smoke and stale whiskey hung about his unshaven jaw. I had stopped keeping track of Colin's life long ago, but his name still reached me, through news, acquaintances, whispers I never sought. In the past month, he tried everything, begging friends for loans, pitching poorly formed business ideas to anyone who'd listen, even weakly reaching out to me, hoping I'd relent. No one was buying what he offered. I had cut every financial tie he once depended on. The house was transferred, accounts frozen. He lost access to any sub-accounts under my name, and every auto payment on his credit cards was canceled. Loan applications were denied. Calls went unanswered. Even Tessa had started to lose patience. Colin, when are you going to come up with the money? Her voice, once syrupy, now held the sharp edge of dwindling excuses. She had believed she was marrying into ease, a life of leisure with a well-groomed man whose mother would keep the funds flowing. Now she watched that fantasy crumble as Colin slipped from privileged trust fund heir to indebted man with no one left to fool. That afternoon, after a gardening class, I sat on my balcony reviewing foundation proposals. One caught my eye, an arts high school in Boston seeking to establish a studio honoring Emily Harrington, dedicated to supporting young artists from low-income families. I approved the grant immediately. Along with it, I attached a freshly printed letterhead from the foundation. That gesture, the purpose behind it, meant far more to me than handing Colin a check ever could. Just before dinner, Martha's video call came through. She appeared outside the old house, her face drawn and serious. Ma'am, I need to update you, she said quietly. Colin isn't doing well. I didn't respond, just nodded, giving her room to continue. He's been rejected for multiple loans. None of his old friends are returning his calls. Rumor has it he's been spotted at a few casinos and has already racked up a significant debt. I set down my teacup without a word. I wasn't surprised. Not really. The moment he decided to treat a mother's love like a bargaining chip, he'd already begun losing everything. Someone saw him at a private club the other night, Martha went on. He lost big, tried to use the house as collateral, only to discover too late the deed wasn't in his name anymore. People say he nearly lost it right there. I closed my eyes, taking a slow, deep breath. I've done enough, I whispered. If he can't see what's broken by now, no one can save him. A pause. Then Martha asked gently, Do you plan to see him again? I said nothing. Instead, my gaze drifted to the still lake beyond the balcony. I knew the day would come, a final meeting between mother and son, but it wouldn't be a reunion. It would be goodbye for good. When he showed up at Skyview's front gate, I was deep into the foundation's annual report. A nurse knocked softly as I was revising a section. Mrs. Whitmore, she said quietly. There's a man at the front desk. He says he's family. I set my pen down slowly. What does he look like? I asked. The nurse hesitated before whispering, tired, a bit rough. I nodded, stood, and slipped on my coat. As I approached the entrance, I spotted him near the garden path, beside the hydrangeas just beginning to bloom. He looked like a shadow of the man he once tried so desperately to be. Wrinkled, stained clothes hung loosely on him. His hair was unkempt, face shadowed with patchy stubble. The pride that once shone in his eyes was gone. Our eyes locked for several seconds. His first words weren't a greeting or explanation. You won, he said quietly. I stood at the top of the steps watching the man who used to be my son, now just a boy who had finally run out of escape routes. Colin, I said softly. This was never a contest. I never needed to win. He gave a bitter smile. I have nothing left. Even Tessa's gone. I nodded, unmoved. What do you want from me? I asked. He opened his mouth, searching for words, then lowered his gaze. I really messed up, he admitted. I sighed. That admission felt emptier than the childish apologies he once muttered, teary-eyed over a broken vase. Because now, I knew he wasn't sorry. He was stranded. I don't even have a place to stay anymore, he whispered. Are you really just going to leave me like this? I stayed silent for a long moment. I'm not abandoning you, Colin, I said finally. I'm letting you take responsibility for yourself. He looked up, a flicker in his eyes. Rage or grief, I couldn't tell. You weren't like this before. No, I replied. I wasn't. I used to be the mother who gave everything for you, even my dignity. But that woman no longer lives here. You can call it cruel or cold, but understand this. You brought us here. I turned and walked back inside. The door closed softly behind me. I could feel him standing there outside, but he didn't call after me. Not once. That night, as I lay in bed, the gentle lap of the lake against the shore drifted through my window. I thought back to him as a baby, curling in my arms, babbling, cooing, trying to form words. Back then, I believed that if I loved him enough, he would grow into a kind, responsible man. I was wrong. Real growth doesn't come from being carried. It comes from learning to stand alone. I had let go. He had a long road ahead. As for me, there was still so much to do, people to support, chapters to write. I never thought I'd be starting over at this stage of life. But that's how life works, isn't it? The chapters that truly belong to you often don't begin until you've convinced yourself the story is over. Spring at Skyview was breathtaking. Tulips in the garden just peeking through the soil, patches of violets like dreams softly scattered across the lawn. I sat on the balcony, the latest foundation grant list resting in my lap. Since founding the Emily Harrington Art Foundation, we'd supported a dozen young artists, 2 already preparing for their first solo shows. We partnered with local high schools to provide free art classes and materials to children from low-income families. People often ask, Mrs. Whitmore, what inspired you to devote your later years to arts education? I always smile and reply, I chose to give what would have otherwise been wasted wealth to those who create. But the truth is, it's a gift I give myself. Each grant, every student supported. It's how I remind myself I still have value, purpose, and the power to shape something meaningful. That evening, I attended a small exhibition hosted by the foundation. The Skyview multipurpose hall had been transformed into a cozy gallery. A group of students stood proudly beside their works, chatting and laughing, eyes bright with hope. A shy girl named Nora approached me. Her painting was a minimalist watercolor, a lone woman standing beside a lake, a single orchid blooming. I painted this for you, she said softly. I heard you love orchids. I smiled and took the painting. Thank you, Nora. You know, this looks a lot like me. Her eyes widened. Really? I nodded. But not anymore. I'm not the woman standing alone at the lake's edge. I've stepped into my own life. After the exhibit, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, watching moonlight dance across the lake's surface. Children's laughter echoed faintly in the distance. Nearby, the seniors' choir rehearsed, their harmonies drifting like a lullaby. Life was quiet now, and kind. Later that night, Martha messaged me. The community garden at the old house had finally been renovated. She attached a photo, Old friends laughing in the kitchen, fresh herbs and roses blooming in the yard. The house looked more alive than it ever had when I lived there. I sent back a simple message. Take good care of that home. Think of it as your second chapter. Her reply came quickly. You didn't just give us a house, you gave us dignity. I stared at her words, my eyes welling with tears. Only then did I realize the thing I thought I had lost wasn't gone at all. It had simply changed form. A few days later, a letter arrived. The handwriting was uneven, shaky, but unmistakably his. It was from Colin. He wrote that he had finally read the last letter I'd left him and that he truly understood how deeply he'd failed me. He told me he'd moved into a modest apartment in the suburbs, taken a job as a warehouse clerk, and had started working to quit gambling. He admitted he knew this was the life he had earned. He didn't expect forgiveness. But maybe he hoped one day he might stand before me, not to ask for anything, but simply to be seen as a changed man. I didn't write back. Instead, I placed the letter gently in my drawer, right beside Emily's painting. Maybe one day I'll forgive him, but not today. Not because I'm still angry, but because I finally learned to put myself first. That morning, the sun rose soft and golden as I walked alone along the garden path at Skyview. The breeze was warm, and I felt lighter, like a part of me had finally released its hold. I knew my story wasn't finished yet. Maybe I'd spent the first half of my life living for others, caring, pleasing, compromising, shrinking myself to fit their needs. But the rest, well, that belonged to me. May my steps never again drag beneath the weight of anyone else's expectations. May my heart never again shrink to fit inside another's world. And may everything that comes after 65 finally, gloriously, be mine. Only when a man hits rock bottom does he truly look back and see who stood by him at the top. I used to think I had it all. Money, time, a future paved with ease. But losing everything taught me something crucial. Life doesn't come with a reset button. My name is Colin Whitmore. Once people called me the Golden Boy, wealthy, sharp, well-connected, destined for success. Now I'm just a man with nothing to his name. I want to tell my story, not to defend myself or seek pity, but to make sense of it all, to piece together how I managed to ruin a winning hand so completely. Lately, my dreams have taken me back to childhood. Back when life was good. No, perfect. Mom would hum an old tune while baking apple pie, the scent drifting through the house like a promise. Outside the window, her rose bushes bloomed in gentle clusters. I'd sit on my little stool, waiting for the first slice to cool, asking, Mom, will you always stay with me? She'd smile and nod every time. Of course, sweetheart. Her hands were delicate, capable of transforming plain white paper into masterpieces for my school projects. Dad was quiet and bookish, a university professor who loved reading poetry on the couch. Though he worked late most nights every weekend without fail, he'd take me fishing by the lake. Boys need to learn patience, Colin, he'd say. If you can wait for the fish, you can wait for life. He didn't say much, but his steady, warm eyes said enough. They loved me deeply, and I loved them back with all the force a child's heart can hold. When I was sick, Mom stayed up all night by my side. On my birthdays, Dad never gave me toys, just books. A man should be proud of his mind, not his wallet, he'd say. Back then, I didn't understand. Love felt automatic, unshakable. I never imagined what losing it would feel like. Dad's death was sudden, a heart attack like a thunderbolt. I remember that night, Mom clutching me, sobbing like a child. I cried too, but beneath it all, what I really felt was fear. Fear that the roof above us had cracked, that no one was left to hold it up. But Mom didn't break. She stepped up, took charge of Dad's affairs, restructured the family trust, managed every detail with her own hands. And I got used to being taken care of. I respected her, truly did. But somewhere along the way, respect twisted into something else. She gave me everything I wanted. Clothes, toys, tuition, opportunities. I never lacked for good things, not once. And what did I give her? A son who came home less and less, whose voice grew colder with every visit, whose disappointments piled up like unpaid debts. The first taste of that circle came in high school. Kids like me, rich, entitled, untouchable. Their fathers owned half the city's real estate. Their mothers ran art galleries and hosted fundraisers that felt like fashion shows. After school, they peeled off in sports cars, hit the beach with champagne, and spoke loudly about venture capital and connections, as if the world already belonged to them. The first time I went to one of their parties, I watched a guy pop a bottle of Dom Perignon just to hear the crowd cheer. I didn't know why, but something inside me snapped awake. That night, I realized something. Status is the only passport that matters. So I changed. I began to despise the clean, modest shirts Mom picked out for me. I begged her for overpriced designer brands with flashy logos and empty prestige. I turned my nose up at Martha's warm, wholesome meals. No more dinners at home, just ribeye steaks at trendy restaurants and wines I couldn't pronounce. I surrounded myself with friends who measured worth in wristwatches and bottle service. They took me to nightclubs, private poker rooms, luxury boutiques, and I spent. God, did I spend. The moment I pulled out that black card, I felt invincible, like the heir I wanted to be, like someone important. And Mom? She became the one person I couldn't stand to face. She'd ask, "What VA have you been working on lately?" I'd brush it off. "Projects." She'd say, "You're spending too much." I'd sneer, "What's money for if not to spend?" She'd warn, "You need to take responsibility for yourself." I'd shoot back, "Then why leave me an inheritance at all?" The more she tried to reach me, the more I pulled away. She didn't get me. She didn't understand I was trying to belong to a world where money meant power. So I began to see her, not as my mother, but as an obstacle. The more she disapproved of my friends, the tighter I clung to them. The more she criticized my lifestyle, the louder I flaunted it. It wasn't that I didn't know I was letting her down. I just didn't care. I told myself she was bitter, jealous, controlling. My friends told me the same thing. She just doesn't want you to surpass her. So I stopped going home. Whenever I showed up, it was always with the same request. "I need some seed money. There's a promising investment. This could be the foundation of our future." At first, she'd try to talk me down. Then she grew silent. Eventually, she stopped setting a place for me at the table altogether. I told myself she was finally learning her role, but she never gave up on me. Month after month, money still found its way into my account. Martha still delivered medicine when I was ill, and not once did I utter a word of thanks. There was a time I nearly got sucked into a shady investment scam. She found me legal help, cleaned up the mess without fanfare, and when I came home raging about her meddling, she just looked at me, worn and quiet. "I only want to keep you from making the worst mistakes," she said softly. But I snapped, "This is my life. You can't control me forever." Looking back, that was probably the cruelest thing I ever said to her. But the worst was yet to come, her 60th birthday. I came home, not to celebrate, but to strategize. I brought Tessa, who was pregnant. We were desperate for money, and I convinced myself that Tessa's condition would be the perfect bargaining chip. I told myself it was just business. Mom had that massive house all to herself. The family trust, the foundation funds. It was all sitting there, untouched. She'd never refused me before. She'd help now. I thought I had it all figured out. We planned to unveil Tessa and the baby as a surprise, talk about keeping the family together, then ask her to move in and assist with postpartum care. Once she was softened, I'd ask for the real favor, financial support, just enough to get us back on our feet. I thought I was clever, but she saw right through me. When she said, "So the big surprise is, you want me to be your nanny?" I felt the ground slip away beneath me. For the first time, I realized she wasn't playing along anymore. I panicked but tried to keep control. She didn't yell or argue. She vanished, completely and quietly. No theatrics, no confrontation. She signed the Skyview agreement, set up a trust, transferred the deed, cut off every financial lifeline, each step deliberate, like an inked goodbye I couldn't erase. Yet I thought she'd come back. I still remember the day she handed me the residency papers for Skyview. I wasn't shocked. Rage overwhelmed me instead. Not because she was leaving, but because she had the audacity to walk away without asking me. I'd gotten used to her waiting for me, forgiving me without question, soft no matter how hard I pushed. I thought she'd always be that woman, the one who would soothe me after I shattered her favorite porcelain cup with a gentle, "It's all right, sweetheart. Don't cry." But this time, she turned her back and left. And when she did, she took everything. The money, the house, the borrowed identity I wore like a costume, even the love I pretended I didn't need. She took that too. I begged friends for loans. They told me, Colin, that act stopped working years ago. I applied for credit cards. The bank told me, sorry, your linked accounts have been deactivated. I tried to use the house as collateral, and that's when I discovered it wasn't mine anymore. Then Tessa left. She walked away in silence. Just like that, I had nothing left to bargain with. No baby, no partner, no excuse to crawl back to mom. So I gambled. Told myself I'd win it all back in one night, maybe two. But I kept losing. And with every bet, I lost a little more of myself. By the time I stood outside the gates of Skyview, I barely recognized the man I'd become. Then she appeared, emerging from sunlight like she belonged to it. Calm, clear-eyed, whole. I said, you win. She replied, this was never a competition. I admitted I was wrong. She looked at me and asked, what now? In that moment, I finally understood. She wasn't punishing me. She was choosing herself. That night I went home, if it could still be called that, to the tiny apartment I'd rented in the suburbs. I sat at my battered desk, hands shaking, and wrote her a letter. I told her I'd found a warehouse job, that I was trying to start over, that I didn't know if she could forgive me, but that I understood at last. She was the only person who ever loved me without conditions. I don't know if she'll ever respond. I don't expect her to, but I folded the letter carefully and mailed it anyway. Because the truth is, I've got a long way to go. There are debts to settle, mistakes to undo, ruins to rebuild, piece by piece. She gave me everything. Her kindness, patience, and strength. And I crushed it all beneath the weight of my pride. She wasn't my ATM. She wasn't my safety net. She was my home. And I thought she'd never leave, but she did. Only now do I realize she'd already given me everything. And now it's my turn to spend what's left of this life becoming the man worthy of the love I once took for granted.